David had always been a man of simple dreams. He didn't care much for riches or fancy things. He just wanted a peaceful life with his wife, Lisa. They had been married for 3 years, living in a small but cozy apartment in the heart of the city. Lisa was not wealthy. In fact, she came from a struggling background, but she was kind, hardworking, and deeply in love with David. Hello, family. Welcome to Storytime Mutually. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Like and share this video to your friends and loved ones. Thank you as you do so. Sit back, relax as we dive into the story. Unfortunately, David's mother, Mrs. Collins, did not approve of Lisa. From the very first day, she had made it clear that her son deserved better. "David, how can you marry a woman who can barely feed herself?" she would say. "What kind of future do you see with her? Love doesn't pay bills." David always defended Lisa, but his mother's words began to sink into his mind. Then, as if fate wanted to test him, a woman named Victoria entered the picture. Victoria was everything Lisa was not: rich, elegant, and well-connected. Her family owned several businesses, and she had just returned from studying abroad. David's mother saw an opportunity and wasted no time pushing her son toward Victoria. "Son, this is your chance to marry into a wealthy family. Imagine the life you could have. You don't have to struggle anymore," she whispered in his ear. At first, David resisted. He loved Lisa, and the thought of leaving her felt wrong. But after months of pressure, insults from his mother, and the temptation of a luxurious life, he made a decision he would later regret. He left Lisa. The divorce was painful. Lisa cried, begged him to reconsider, but he had already made up his mind. He believed he was choosing a better life. As he walked out of their tiny apartment for the last time, Lisa's final words haunted him. "One day, David, you will regret this decision. And when that day comes, I hope it's not too late." David ignored her, convinced he was making the right choice. He married Victoria in a grand wedding, surrounded by wealth, expensive food, and guests who barely knew him. For the first few months, everything seemed perfect. He moved into a mansion, drove expensive cars, and enjoyed the life he had once only dreamed of. But soon, cracks began to appear in his paradise. Victoria was nothing like Lisa. She was arrogant, demanding, and treated David like a servant rather than a husband. She controlled everything: the money, the house, even his friends. David had gone from being a man to being a prisoner in his own marriage. But the worst was yet to come. David sat on the expensive leather couch in his mansion, staring at the untouched plate of food in front of him. The first few months of his marriage to Victoria had been like a dream, traveling to exotic places, wearing designer clothes, and driving the latest cars. But now, that dream had turned into a nightmare. Victoria had changed. Or maybe she had always been this way, and he had been too blinded by greed to notice. She controlled every aspect of his life, treating him more like an employee than a husband. "David, I need you to drive me to the spa at 2 p.m., she commanded one morning without even looking up from her phone. David sighed. "I thought we had a driver?" "Yes, but I want you to take me. Is there a problem?" He knew better than to argue. The last time he refused one of her demands, she had taken away his credit card for a week, forcing him to ask her for money, like a child. At first, he told himself it wasn't a big deal. He still had the wealth, the cars, and the lifestyle. But little by little, Victoria stripped him of his dignity. She made fun of him in front of her rich friends. "This is David," she would say with a fake smile. "He doesn't work because, well, he doesn't have to. I take care of everything." They would all laugh, and David would force a smile, feeling like a useless trophy husband. She controlled his spending. "Why do you need 50,000 Nigerian nairas?" she once asked when he requested money. "I just need to take care of something. If it's important, I'll handle it. Just tell me what you need the money for." He felt like a child asking his mother for allowance. She even made him sign a prenuptial agreement before the wedding, which meant if they divorced, he would leave with nothing. At the time, he hadn't cared. He had been too excited about the luxury. But now it was all becoming clear. He had traded love for a cage. The final straw came one evening at a dinner party Victoria hosted for her friends. David had spent the entire evening fetching drinks, smiling at people who barely acknowledged him, and pretending to enjoy himself. When the party ended, he finally sat down, exhausted. Victoria walked in, furious. "What the hell was that, David? What are you talking about?" he asked, confused. "You embarrass me. My friends asked you simple questions, and you just sat there like a fool. Do you know how ridiculous you looked?" David clenched his fists. "I'm your husband, Victoria, not your servant." She laughed coldly. "Husband? Please. You're just a man lucky enough to be married to me." That was it. That was the moment David knew he had made the worst mistake of his life. For the first time in years, he thought about Lisa. She had loved him without conditions, supported him despite their struggles, and never made him feel less of a man. And he had thrown all of that away for this? That night, he made a decision. The next morning, he walked into Victoria's room while she was scrolling through her phone. "I want a divorce," he said firmly. Victoria raised an eyebrow and smirked. "A divorce? Oh, David. That's adorable. You think you can just leave?" "I'm serious, Victoria. I can't do this anymore." She leaned back, crossing her arms. "Fine. But remember, you signed the prenup. You leave with nothing." David already knew that. He had accepted it the moment he made the decision. He had arrived in this marriage chasing wealth, and now he was leaving with nothing. "I don't care," he said, walking away. With nowhere else to go, David moved into a small one-bedroom apartment in the outskirts of town. He had no job, no savings, and no plan. But for the first time in years, he felt free. He started doing small jobs to survive, driving taxis, fixing computers, and anything that could put food on his table. He had to learn humility the hard way. Months passed, and one day, he overheard something at a roadside restaurant that made his heart stop. "Have you heard about Lisa?" David's ears perked up. "Lisa? You mean David's ex-wife?" another man asked. "Yes. She came back from abroad last month. Apparently, she started a business there, and now she's super rich." David nearly dropped his spoon. Lisa? The same Lisa he had abandoned because she was poor? She was now rich. Curiosity got the best of him. He found her address through a mutual friend and decided to go see her. As he stood outside her grand house, he felt a strange mix of emotions: regret, shame, and fear. Would she even talk to him? Taking a deep breath, he knocked on the door. And when Lisa opened it, looking more beautiful and confident than ever, he realized something painful. He had truly lost the best thing that ever happened to him. David stood frozen at Lisa's doorstep, his heart racing. He barely recognized the woman in front of him. Gone was the timid, struggling wife he had abandoned. The woman before him was confident, radiant, and dressed in an elegant outfit that screamed wealth and success. Lisa's eyes widened in shock when she saw him. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. Finally, she crossed her arms and leaned against the doorframe. "David," she said, raising an eyebrow. "What are you doing here?" David swallowed hard. He had rehearsed 100 different things to say, but now, standing in front of her, words failed him. I just wanted to see you," he stammered. Lisa let out a small, bitter laugh. "See me? After all these years? Why?" David hesitated. How was he supposed to explain that he had lost everything? That he had left the rich woman he had chosen over her and now realized his mistake? "I heard you were back," he said quietly, "and that you're doing well." Lisa gave him a long, unreadable look before stepping aside. "Come in." David hesitated for a moment, then stepped inside. The house was breathtaking: high ceilings, expensive furniture, and a grand chandelier hanging in the center of the living room. It smelled of fresh roses and wealth. He couldn't believe it. Lisa, the woman he had abandoned because she was too poor, was now living the kind of life he had always dreamed of. She gestured for him to sit while she walked over to a small bar and poured herself a drink. "So, David," she said, taking a sip, "what do you want?" David rubbed his hands nervously. "Lisa, I know I hurt you. I made a terrible mistake, and I regret it every day. Lisa raised an eyebrow. Do you? Yes, he said quickly. I was foolish. I let my mother convince me that money was more important than love. And now I've lost everything. Victoria treated me like a servant. She never loved me. She only wanted a man she could control. And when I finally left her, I realized he looked down. I realized I had thrown away the best thing in my life. Lisa didn't respond immediately. Instead, she swirled the liquid in her glass, her expression unreadable. Then she chuckled. You know what's funny, David? She said, shaking her head. When you left me, I thought my life was over. I cried for months. I begged God to bring you back. I felt worthless, like I wasn't good enough. David lowered his head in shame. Lisa continued. But do you know what happened after that? She leaned forward. I picked myself up. I stopped crying and started working. I got a scholarship to study abroad, and while I was there, I built a business from scratch. I worked harder than I ever have in my life, and now, she gestured around the beautiful house. Now, I have everything I ever wanted. David swallowed the lump in his throat. I'm proud of you, Lisa. I really am. Lisa smiled, but there was sadness in her eyes. The thing is, David, I didn't need you to be rich. I needed you to believe in me, but you didn't. David felt a sharp sting in his chest. She was right. He had abandoned her when she needed him most. He hesitated before asking the question that had been burning inside him. Is there any chance we could start over? Lisa let out a short, almost amused laugh. Start over? She shook her head. David, I'm not the same woman you left. And you're not the same man I loved. That chapter of my life is closed. David felt his heart sink. Lisa sighed and stood up. I don't hate you, David. I've forgiven you, but I've moved on. And so should you. David sat there, stunned. He had come hoping to rekindle what they once had. But now, he realized the truth. Lisa had outgrown him. He had left her because she was poor. And now, she was rich, successful, and stronger than ever without him. And that was the most painful part of all. As David stepped outside, defeated, he heard a deep male voice call from inside the house. Lisa, babe, who was at the door? David froze. Lisa turned back to him with a small, knowing smile. My fiancé, she said. Take care, David. And with that, she closed the door. David stood there, staring at the closed door, feeling like the biggest fool on earth. Lisa had moved on. She had found someone better. And he was left with nothing but his regrets. David stood outside Lisa's house, frozen in place. His mind replayed the last few moments over and over again. The sound of Lisa's voice, the way she had looked at him. Not with anger, not with love, but with something worse, indifference. And then the voice. Her fiancé. She had moved on. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. For years, he had believed that if he ever wanted to go back, Lisa would be waiting. But now, he saw the truth. She had built a new life, and he was nothing but a memory. The door remained shut in front of him, but in his mind, it might as well have been a massive iron gate locking him out of a life he had foolishly abandoned. He swallowed hard and turned away, walking slowly down the street. His steps were heavy, his chest tight. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to think about everything, his choices, his mistakes, his regrets. David had nowhere to go. His small one-bedroom apartment felt colder than ever when he finally arrived. He sat on his worn-out couch, staring at the ceiling. His mind drifted back to the past, to the tiny one-room apartment he had once shared with Lisa. He remembered the nights they stayed up talking about their dreams. He remembered how she used to save the best part of her meal for him, even when they had barely enough food. He remembered how she used to pray for him, how she believed in him when no one else did. And how had he repaid her? By throwing her away like she was nothing. David ran a hand over his face and sighed deeply. For years, he had blamed his mother for convincing him to leave Lisa. But now he realized the truth. He had made the choice. His greed had destroyed his own happiness. And now he was alone. A final confrontation. The next day, David visited his mother. She was seated in the living room, watching a Yoruba movie on TV when he walked in. Her eyes widened in surprise. David? What are you doing here? David didn't waste time. Lisa is rich now. His mother blinked. What? She went abroad, built a business, and now she's a millionaire. He exhaled sharply. She has a big house, expensive cars, everything you wanted for me. His mother stared at him, trying to process the news. Then she scoffed. Well, good for her. David narrowed his eyes. Good for her? He let out a bitter laugh. Mama, you told me she would never amount to anything. You told me I needed to marry a rich woman, or I would suffer forever. Look where that got me. His mother shifted uncomfortably. David, I was only looking out for your future. A man needs security. No, Mama, David interrupted. A man needs a good woman. And I had one, but I threw her away because of you. His voice cracked. Lisa would have stayed with me through anything. She believed in me. And I left her for Victoria, who treated me like a dog. His mother sighed. I didn't know Victoria would be like that. David shook his head. It doesn't matter. The point is, I made the worst decision of my life. And now Lisa has moved on. She's engaged. His mother's eyes widened in shock. Engaged? David nodded. I lost her, Mama. Forever. Silence filled the room. For the first time, his mother looked truly remorseful. David, I'm sorry, she said quietly. I thought I was helping you. David sighed. It's too late for sorry. Moving forward. For weeks, David struggled with his emotions. He went through different stages, anger at himself, sadness, regret, but eventually, he realized there was only one thing left to do. Move on. One evening, he sat down with a notebook and started writing down his plans. He needed to get back on his feet. He needed to stop living in the past. Lisa had built the life without him. Now he had to build his own. It wasn't easy. He took a job as a sales representative at a company, working long hours to rebuild his savings. Slowly, he started investing in small businesses. He learned from his mistakes. It took him years, but eventually, David became successful again. Not in the way he had once imagined, not by marrying a rich woman, but by working hard and making smart choices. 5 years later, David was walking through a shopping mall when he heard a familiar laugh. He turned and saw her. Lisa. She was with her husband, a tall, well-dressed man who looked at her with the kind of love David once had for her. They were pushing a baby stroller, a little girl inside. Lisa was glowing with happiness. David's heart clenched, but for the first time, it wasn't out of pain. It was acceptance. Lisa deserved this happiness. And though it had taken him years, he finally understood something important. Money could never replace love. He smiled softly, turned around, and walked away, ready to embrace the future that was waiting for him. That brings us to the end of this video. If you enjoy this video, kindly like and share it to your friend and loved ones. And if you haven't subscribed, please do well to click on the subscribe button for more videos. Thanks for watching.